All right, guys, today we're going to talk about conflict. So, this whole last couple of weeks, we have been discussing how we think about things and how we are focusing on things, how we behave with each other. And remember, I'm going to repeat it a million times because I think it's really important. Where does hospitality start? It starts in our heart. So, this is where we begin to change the world inside of us, and this is where we begin to change the world around us, and we make this place such a wonderful place to work. But not only that, you're going to see when you practice some of the things that I teach you that your life is going to change. The relationships with people around you are going to change, and that's really ultimately what my goal is at the end of the day. Is honestly, I just want to make your lives better. I want to see you flourish and grow, and my life model is that life has been good for me, so I want to make sure that it's good for everyone else as well. And if any of you know my story from where I began, life wasn't good. It wasn't happy. I was actually homeless at 11 years old. So I started out having a really difficult time, but eventually when I became an adult and I got to be able to be in control of my life, I realized some of the tools that the adults around me had been giving me for how to respond to life and disappointments were incorrect. And so these are just a compilation of things that I've learned over time, and my hope and goal is that these things will also help and grow you and change your life. And so I appreciate you suffering through this, and I believe that it's going to be good. So today we're going to talk about conflict management. So conflict resolution, really, to me, is actually a natural occurrence. It happens all the time. And if you can just right now, everybody just realize that conflict is normal. We're all going to have conflict. It's a part of life. I really think that conflict has existed since the beginning of time. It's actually a great tool for everything. So knowing that, the more time you spend with an individual, that means that you're actually going to increase the amount of conflict that you're going to have with them. If you spend a day a month with one of your friends, one day a month, that's all the amount of time that you spend with them, how much conflict are you going to have with them? If you're walking through the grocery store and you see somebody for 10 seconds, how much conflict are you going to have with that person? But if you spend 40 hours a week working in a place with the same people, you're going to have more conflict. Just by the natural law of average, you're going to have more conflict with that person or with those people. And it's because we're spending more time with each other. And we're also stacking up things and reasons to have conflict, right? Because we're going to have things that somebody does that's annoying. And if they do it one time, that's no big deal. They do it 2 times, after the 10th time, it's like, look, mother effer, I'm ready to wring your neck, right? So you got to realize that conflict is normal. It actually exists for a purpose. And so that comes to my first point, which is that conflict is good. Conflict is good because it teaches us how to work with each other. It teaches us how to understand each other, and it teaches us how to express our needs and our desires. Because if I am just going around and pretending like everything's hunky-dory and it's always good and there's never any problems, and Bill and I have conflict and I never tell him that I have conflict, then I'm just going to end up eventually become a doormat in our relationship, and that's not fair, right? And so conflict is me going, hey, I don't like it when you do that. And that kind of hurts my feelings. And I don't really appreciate how you say that. That's not a bad thing. When it becomes bad, it's the way that we say it and when we say it. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I need you to understand that conflict is really good. Conflict is everywhere. If you fail at something, let's say my favorite story is a math test. You fail at a math test and you go home. Inside, you are feeling like, oh, that was awful. I really feel bad about that. And usually what will happen is you'll say to yourself, I need to study harder because the next test, I'm not going to do so bad. My next test, I'm going to do much better. I'm going to go home and study. But when you ace that math test and you don't have any problems going in without studying, and then you walk out with this arrogance and this confidence like, oh, look at me. I'm this new hot stuff and I can do everything, right? But that's not a good philosophy to have. You never really grow from that. And so you having lots of failures and math tests in your life that cause you to continue to look at the situation, reconsider what had happened, reconfigure your responses, that's a good thing, because that's continuing to help you to level up, continuing to help you to grow, to be a better version of yourself. So conflict is good, and we should not be avoiding it. We should be diving in the deep end and going, you know what? The more conflict, the better, because when I have conflict in my life, it helps me to grow. Unless when you have conflict in your life, you go, it's everybody else's fault. In that case, you walk into that math test and you go, I failed because of the teacher. I failed because of the room. I failed because the paper wasn't right. If you do that, then conflict is not good for you. Conflict is not helping you grow into a better version of yourself. And then also pain. I hated pain when I was younger because pain always meant that there was change coming, especially growing up in that uncomfortable lifestyle and having to make a lot of adult decisions far before I needed to. Change was always pain. But I had to reprogram that in my mind. And I talk a lot about reprogramming the way that you think, because I really believe that you do not have to stay the person that you are. You do not have to respond and behave and just be. You are not just a being. Do you know what identity means? Identity means what you are doing and who you believe you are. And in your brain, if you believe that you are a good conflict resolver, you will be. And if you say to yourself, well, I'm just a hothead, guess what? That's what you'll be. So I really believe in this. So in the Bible, it actually says, harsh words stir up anger, but a soft reply will turn away wrath. So what Christians teach is that when you have conflict, the way that you respond to the conflict is incredibly important. There's a Chinese parable that says, one mountain cannot contain two tigers. It makes me think about when Bill and I used to run Main Event together and how much conflict there was between us, because we were both very, very alpha strong, and it was difficult for us to give in. And I can remember this one instance where he came in the kitchen, I was cooking on the grill, and he had some opinions to tell me, and they were not said in a way that I really wanted them to be said. And he, lo and behold, at the end of it, I threw a spatula across the kitchen, which I do not condone. It is never okay to behave that way, and I just want to make sure that is understood. So, yes. And then in Buddhism, they teach that conflict fades not with force, but with compassion. So all of these religions are talking about the internal battle that happens within us that becomes the external battle that we have with each other. And that's why that is so very, very important to me. Whenever I am teaching about conflict, anything in your life, really it all starts with happening what's inside, which is why I say hospitality starts here, right? Because it's what's in the heart that is coming out of the mouth. And so who can we control? Just yourself, right? You can only control you. I can't tell you all the 7 steps to have a new husband by tomorrow, but I can tell you the 7 steps to be a better wife so your husband is a new person tomorrow. Because when we change, the world around us changes. The energy around us changes, and we have a choice. And sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it's a lot of conversation. Sometimes it's a lot of reflection and conversation inside, and just rebuking things that are harmful within us to calm ourselves down. Imagine what it's like for the other person as well. So we have to give that grace. So the second thing is, the point that I want to make is that it's going to take humility. If I can spell. All right, humility. And humility is strength. You know, our culture tries to say that people that are humble are doormats, that we need to postulate ourselves and demand our right, and we deserve, and nobody's going to treat me that way. And the truth is that actually being humble is the strongest, the most mightiest people in our culture. People that have the ability to have self-control, everyone wants to be around that type of person. And the reason we want to be around them is because they are exhibiting so much power in their being. They are able to withstand and say to the world that it doesn't matter what energy you bring, I'm going to be me. And remember last week we were talking about how when somebody opens the door and the cold air rolls into the building, and how we have an opportunity to respond to the cold air or decide to be our own regulator, to be our own thermostat, and say, you know what, no, I'm not going to do that. I am going to stay at 70 degrees. And you can do that in any circumstances. I used to tell my children, it doesn't matter what anybody's doing to you. It doesn't matter how anyone's behaving. You are still in control of you, and you still are responsible for your response. And so when you are responding, it's okay to have humility, because that is strength. All right, and that brings me to my last point, which is this. And this is practical. So I'm going to call it UPS. Okay, and this is where I'm going to kind of bring all of this together so that you understand it a little bit better. So when you're dealing with conflict, it's really important to consider your responses. And the first response, the U, is you need to understand. And it's really hard. Trust me, it's really hard when my feelings are hurt for me to say to myself, okay, what were they thinking? I was thinking this, but what were they thinking? So it's understanding the root of the issue. When Bill and I have conflict in our marriage, and it's so awful to constantly use my marriage as an example, but I think it's actually really good to use it, because remember what I said is that the person that you spend the most time with is the person you're probably going to have the most conflict with, just because of the law of average. So I definitely have more conflict with him than I do with anybody else in my life. Certainly after 24 years, a lot less conflict, and it really doesn't last very long. It's like, hey, I didn't like that. And he goes, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. And then we move on. Or he goes, hey, don't do that. And I go, oh, okay. And then we move on. Whereas maybe in our early marriage, it was more like things flying across the room and lots of screaming and slamming doors. So we're different now because we were learning how to have conflict in a healthier, more positive way with each other. But so understanding the root of what's going on. So that's the first, the U in the UPS is you need to understand the root. The issue is not the issue, okay? It's not because you put the chicken in the wrong fridge. That is not the issue. The issue is that you didn't follow direction, or that you've been told before, or that this person feels like I do everything and nobody does anything, which is also an internal struggle that is not correct, but you have to understand that sometimes that's what people are battling. We're battling these great big giants inside of us. We have this conversation that's going on that the rest of the world doesn't get to hear it, only us. And sometimes that conversation can take us down this track that is pretty awful. Or let's say this person had a really rough childhood, and that's a word that triggers them, that makes them feel, again, like they were, as a child, abused or neglected or unwanted or unvalued. And I'm not saying that we all change the way that we are to condone a certain behavior. I'm not saying we allow people to throw hissy fits. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I can't control them, but I can control me. My responsibility is to look at them and try to understand what is really what we're fighting about here. Because the issue usually isn't the issue. It usually is something more. And most of the time, the issue is, I don't feel valued. And valued, remember, value is the one thing that we trade our money and our time to get. And we don't just do it in a restaurant. We do it everywhere. We really need value. Is like our next to air and food. Like, that's super important. And that's what we want to give each other. So we want to make sure that everybody feels valued. But please don't turn this on me and go, well, I make everybody else feel valued, but no one makes me feel valued. That's that internal struggle that you're having again, and that's a conversation that you need to have with yourself. And you need to realize that you are what you do, and you are what your standards are. And if you think to yourself, I do everything and nobody else does anything, then you're always going to see the world is attacking you. Because you're not doing everything. If you sat back, which I do a lot, especially now that I have an opportunity to look from a distance, instead of being in the middle with my sleeves up, cutting veggies and cooking, I have a chance to sit back and watch you guys. And everyone here, everyone is working really, really hard. Everyone is doing their part. Some people need reminding, like, all right, let's stay busy, guys. Get off your phone. Let's clean. Don't stand around and talk. When you're talking, make sure you're moving your hands at the same time. Yes, some people are not as efficient as other people. However, everyone is doing their part to make this place a better place. And if that was a trigger for any of you, keep that in mind. You're upsetting your coworkers if you're standing there like this telling a 15-minute joke, or if you're standing like this and staring off into the distance when there's some cleaning that could be done, or if you're on your phone and you're scrolling and you're watching videos. Keep that in mind. Everyone needs to be working, okay? So anyway, that was a side note. That wasn't in my notes. All right, the next thing is the P, which is you need to prepare. So this is much like understand, except prepare is a little bit more. So our culture likes to say, I match energy how we act in today, which is basically saying everyone else is responsible for what temperature I set my thermostat to. But actually, no one is responsible for your response, right? I heard the story of this guy that was going to get a newspaper every day. And every day he would say to the guy, thank you so much. And every day the guy at the stand wouldn't say anything, wouldn't respond, nothing, just nothing. And his friend would come with him. And finally, after several weeks, his friend looks at him and says, why do you always say to that? Why are you always so nice to that guy? He's never nice to you. And he said to him, you know what? I'm nice to him because I don't let how he acts determine how I react. And I think that's really important. I think it's really important that we keep in mind that how someone else acts does not define how I react, because I am in control of me. I decide how I am going to behave today. I decide how I'm going to respond to the world. I decide all of the things that I'm going to do, no matter what I'm feeling inside. But remember, our mind map, there's so much that I had to teach you to get you to this place, so I hope all this makes sense. But remember the mind map. It was how our thoughts and our emotions and all of that all play into each other. So we have our thoughts, which become our choices, which becomes our behaviors, which becomes our experiences, which drives our emotions, which then becomes our thoughts. So if you are feeling a certain way, you're going to start thinking a certain way, then you're going to make choices, then you're going to start behaving, and then you're going to have an experience that's going to drive your emotions, which is going to be this crazy cycle that you're going to find yourself on because you are allowing the world around you to determine how you're going to react. And at some point, you have to say, I'm in control. I'm not letting this wheel of spinning crazy determine how my day is going to go. I'm going to have a good day. I'm going to have a good day. I'm going to go to work, and you know what? That person that's kind of cranky every morning when they walk in, and you go, how are you doing? And they go, I'm not going to let that bother me. Or I walk in the door late, and my boss goes, why are you late? 3 of you got a conversation about that. I'm not going to let that ruin my day because I have a choice. And at the end of the day, if you really ask yourself, am I being understanding? Then maybe the person, what they said, had some validity to it. And when I prepare myself, I'm going to make sure that my mind is in the right spot. I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to bring the right energy. And sometimes that means I need some time. Sometimes it means they need some time. My favorite thing when Bill and I are having conflict, and it seems like we can't resolve it, like he's really mad and he's standing his ground, and I'm really mad and I'm standing my ground, is just to take a break. Wait till the energy changes. Wait till things are a little bit, less, wait till the temperature in the room gets a little bit warmer. And then I like to go up and I like to say, I feel feeling when you feel fact, or when you fact. So it's a phrase that we learned a long time ago in our marriage counseling. It's, I feel this way when you do this fact. And it's really powerful. So I can say, let's use the chicken, since I used that as an example already once. I feel like no one is listening when they put the chicken in with the salad. I feel like no one's paying attention when they put the chicken in with the salad. And I feel like we're going to hurt people if we keep doing that. And you can't argue with that. But if I go, you are such a loser and you never listen and you always put the chicken in with the salad, or you're so dumb, because that's all they're going to hear. You don't even have to say the word dumb, because that's what they're going to hear. Their brain is right away going to say, you're telling me I'm an idiot, and then they're going to respond as such. So we have to be really careful when we are confronting, right? So we have to change our energy. We have to be careful with our words. We have to prepare our hearts. Remember, hospitality, it's right here. It starts right here. And it's so important that we are being understanding, right? Okay, and then the last thing that I wanted to say is we're going to speak truth. So I already sort of talked on this, but I'm going to give you a little bit more. So the words always and never are going to only make that person think to themselves, well, there was the 3 times that I didn't, or there's that 1 time that I did. So whenever you use these absolute words, you're just provoking conflict. Remember the Chinese proverb, 2 tigers cannot exist on the same mountain, and you're going to fight with each other and someone's going to get hurt, or maybe both of you are going to get hurt. We have to be very careful with the words that we choose. And so that statement that I gave you, I'm going to write it down so you remember it, because it's a really, really good one. I feel, and then you put in your feeling, when you, and then you put in the fact. Okay? And you can only use facts. You cannot dream up emotions. You cannot fabricate situations. You have to use factual, real time, right now, not 10 years ago information. So when I was working and I would be cooking and catering, and I would see some cooks standing on the line and they were chatting and they weren't doing anything and it wasn't busy. I can remember this actual one time that I got really upset, and I said, I guess I'll just be the only one that does anything. And what a passive aggressive thing to say, right? I was in my mind thinking we're never going to get done in time. I was stressed out, and I was worried about timelines, all the things that needed to be done. And then I saw the 2 of them not doing anything, and I immediately felt in myself like, I'm the only one that works around here. And then I said those words. And one of the cooks, his name was Chris at the time, he looked at me and he was like, where did that come from? But instead of going, what is your problem? He goes, how can I be helpful? And I tell you what, that immediately dissolved the frustration in me. Remember the Christian proverb, it says, harsh words stir up anger, a soft reply will turn away wrath. And what that's saying is that when we respond to somebody being upset with kindness, not being a doormat, but with kindness, most of the time, it's going to dissolve it. Not all the time. Some people are not as easy to crack their shell, but most of the time, you're going to see them soften. And if you actually pay attention and you just really watch them, you'll see over time, even if it's not an immediate, overnight success story, you're going to see that they slowly start to dissolve. Because you don't know what's going on in them. You don't know the hurt, the pain, the suffering, the struggle that they have had their entire lives. You don't know the lack of value that they have placed on their identity. And so it takes time sometimes for those things to dissolve. But I can tell you with certainty that I've seen it in myself. And if I can change, I keep using me as an example because a lot of you don't know who I used to be. I am a reformed, angry person. I'm going to tell you this story without crying. Some of you know this about me, this little lump on my thumb. I used to be so angry. I used to be one of these people that I motivated people by the sound of my voice, by the energy that I could give, by the however loud I could be, how the biggest bear in the room. That's how I motivated people. And that's the kind of parent I was. I was pretty horrible. It's amazing that my children still talk to me. But so I decided after one big conflict that I couldn't be this person anymore. I was causing too much problems. It wasn't good for anyone. And so I decided that I wanted to change, and I did a study that helps me to deal with that. It showed me how to be different. This is part of the reason why I love books so much, and this is part of the reason why if I see something in you that a book can help, I'm giving it to you, because it's changed my perspective, because I really believe that if you can change your perspective, you can change your entire world. There's a phrase that says, change the way you look at things, and the things that you look at will change. And I absolutely 100% believe that. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to lose my temper anymore. I'm not going to lose my temper anymore. And so I'm doing these self-talks, changing the way that I think. I'm doing all of the things, all the stuff it tells me to do. And I come home and something triggered me. And I was so angry. And one of my pet peeves back then was if you left the couch out in the reclined position, because it's like, how do you even get out? It's like you're this turtle on its back trying to get out of the couch. I mean, it's stupid. But it also made the house look dirty, and I had an issue with dirty house. And so rather than coming over and taking my foot and pushing that seat in, I took all of my energy, all of the anger, all of the everything that was inside of me, the battle that was going on, and I pushed that, the feet rest in on the couch. And when I did it, I heard this tear. It sounded like a big giant rubber band ripping. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? And I grabbed my hand and I ran to the doctor and had it looked at, and I had torn a ligament, and I almost had to have surgery on it. And I've lost the use of my thumb, so now whenever I say, can you open this for me, it's because I cannot actually, I have no strength in that thumb. I have done grip tests, and this hand is weaker, and I'm right hand dominant, so that's, Anyway, and because of that, I wrote this scripture. I had this scripture tattooed on my hand to remind me that my anger does not change people. Because this says, the anger of man does not bring about the righteousness of God, which is saying, I want people to be better. I want the world around me to be better. My heart's desire deeply is that everyone gets along, that we all have this growth and change, and we become the best versions of ourselves, and that I help facilitate that. That's really my heart's desire, is that everything that I do lifts everyone up. And that was a day that I didn't. But this reminds me, so that when I'm in the grocery store and I'm pushing my grocery cart and somebody gives me road rage because they do stupid things like put their cart in the middle of the aisle and go off and look at things, or they stop in the middle of the doorway with their cart, all that stuff irritates me. It reminds me to be nice. Be nice, Kimberly. Be nice. Have compassion. Have understanding. Make sure that I am being the kind person that I say that you need to be. And that's really basically it. I mean, at the end of the day, this is how we are going to get along as a company. This is how we are going to be better as a company. And I just want to see us get along. And I want us to remember that conflict is always going to be there. But look at it as something that helps us grow, helps us to be a better version, helps us to communicate with each other, so that front of house can talk to back of house and say, I need this from you. I'm struggling in this area. And back of house can say to the prep kitchen, I need this from you. I'm struggling in this area. And instead of us all getting angry or taking offense, we learn how to communicate, how to speak to each other in a way that is positive. And we also help our own selves with our own internal stuff that we got going on. All right? So thank you very much for listening, guys. We'll see you next time.